Hey everyone, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, whatever time it is that you are watching this episode. I just want to say a warm welcome to you. I'm so excited about any amount of time that I get to share space with you. Today, I am still continuing on my journey. This is only episode 2 of Graceful Moments with Dr. LaQuoia, but I hope you will take some lessons learned and some nuggets from everything that I am about to share with you. I share my story about leading in a toxic, hostile, and racist work environment as a pharmacy leader. I do this intentionally because too many people are suffering and they remain silent because they are in fear of retaliation. I no longer fear retaliation. In fact, I am feeling more empowered to tell my story so that we can really see the change that needs to happen. So I'm not going to belabor it too much longer. I know our attention spans are quite short. So I'm going to jump right into my Monday poll. Remember, I like to start with my Monday poll so that we can give some context to what I am going to be talking about. And also, it allows me to share my story in such a way that I can help leaders make better choices. I just want us to be better and do better. This Monday poll that I'm showing now was released on Monday, May 8th. And right now, only 11 people have taken the poll as of the time that I released it. If you have not had a chance to take the poll that is currently tracking, please do. That one is on traumas and triggers, and next week is going to be quite an experience, I hope. So this week we're talking about mission, vision, and values, teamwork. So let me ask you a question right now. When's the last time you read the mission, vision, and values for your organization? Have you read them in a while? Or is it something that you just went through in orientation and you forgot them and you put them up? See, I am very much a mission, vision, and values driven person. And I believe that when your personal mission, vision, and values do not align with the organization, there is going to be friction. There's going to be some resistance. And even if your personal mission, vision, and values align with the organization, sometimes there still is friction because the leadership does not walk the talk. And that is where my journey really has taken a turn, is when I see that I have leaders that aren't walking the talk of the organization. Now, I work for an organization that is a leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have won awards and probably continue to win awards in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they still need a lot of help. So we're going to talk about this core value of teamwork this week. I might get to some more core values, but right now we're going to talk about teamwork. So this Monday poll said, which of the following best represents the core value of teamwork? So A, keeping feedback to yourself. B, working in an interim role. C, attending a meeting for your boss. And then D, conduct a PTO pass off. I would agree that all of these could be great examples of teamwork. But I'm going to break down for you how the nuances actually kind of play out. How it can really be both an advantage and a disadvantage for you in each one of these cases. Only one of them is really an advantage, and I will show you how only one of these answers is really ultimately what I believe is teamwork. So how do you define teamwork? Because really it comes down to you. What is your definition of teamwork? At the end of the day, the only person, you're going to hear me say this. You're going to hear me say this in probably just about every episode. If you follow me, like, share, and subscribe. But if you follow me, you're probably going to hear me say this multiple times. There is only one person that you can control, and that is the person that you see in a mirror. That's it. Point blank period. You can only control the person in the mirror. So this is really about, how do you define teamwork? For me, teamwork is collaboration focused on achieving one goal. The leader should provide, support, and remove barriers. And a real cohesive team is such that everyone is able to grow and thrive together. That is my version of teamwork. What's your version of teamwork? I would love to hear in the comments. But let me get back to this poll here. So keeping feedback to yourself. So we had 18% of the votes come back and say keeping feedback to yourself is teamwork. Here's the conundrum. I have yet to work for an organization that said they did not value feedback. All organizations say, we want your feedback. We want to hear from you. And if you watch my last episode, you know that I gave some feedback. I gave some very pointed feedback. And as you continue watching my journey, you're going to find out what happened when I gave that feedback. But I would have to argue that keeping feedback is what keeps the status quo going. Keeping the feedback to yourself means that there won't be any changes. And listen, I get it. For some of you, you're just jaded. You're like, you know what? It's no point in me even giving feedback because nothing is going to change. And if that is you and you're there right now, let me help you. Let me give you a tip. It probably isn't going to change. So the only person that can change is you, because remember, we can only change the person that's in the mirror. So if you're in an environment that is not changing, if you're in an environment where you have given feedback, especially if you're in a position where your feedback should be valued and you should actually be able to make positive changes for the culture and the team around you, if you can't do that, then it's probably time for you to grow, thrive, and exit. It is. It's time for you to grow, thrive, and exit. It is what it is, point blank, period. You can either sit there and take it and be quiet and just get your regular paycheck every other Friday, which is what a lot of people are doing right now. They call that, what are they calling it right now? Quitting and staying. You're there, but you're only there to receive the paycheck every other Friday. Let me tell you, that's going to get old. It gets old. I that was me one time, just clocking in and counting down the Friday. That is no way to live. It's not fulfilling. It's not impactful. It's not meaningful to either you or the people around you. So I would have to disagree that keeping feedback to yourself is not teamwork. Now, I will say the conundrum here is for those of us who have been in middle management. I like to call it the middle hell, because giving feedback, the kind that's not wanted or valued by your leadership, could stunt your career growth at that organization. Absolutely. It absolutely could. And in those cases, you do have to kind of be very choice. You have to, kind of choose wisely when you give feedback and when you don't. The hard part is when you see the train going off the track. When you see that the big vision that somebody has or your leaders have is not going to come to fruition because the people that you support are not going to be able to support the vision. That is the hard part of middle management, because you still have to sit in there and smile and nod your head and then go out to the team and put a pretty bow on an initiative that you know is not going to work. That there is one hard challenge. And so to those leaders who are in those type of situations, all I can say is document. You just have to document. Give the feedback that your leadership needs and document it. Because what you're going to find out in this story is that I documented everything. Documentation is everything. Documentation is everything. So let's move on to B, working in an interim role. Now, some people get really excited about an interim position. I will have to say, pump your brakes, take some caution on that. Taking an interim role is a really good thing if you're looking for a growth opportunity, if you're looking for another position external to the organization, or if you're just really trying it out to see if maybe possibly this might be a good fit for you. Those 3 reasons, good reasons to take an interim role. But what is not a good reason to take an interim role is just if you're just seeking some validation that, your company likes you or your boss likes you or they're going to move you into another role. Not a reason to take an interim role. Another time it's not a good time to take an interim role is when your plate is already too full. When you are already overextended in your role and you take on an interim role, it's not doing you a favor. Yeah, it may look like teamwork, but in the end, you may get screwed. Okay, and let me tell you how that works. I took on an interim manager role even though I was already working as an interim manager. So I was working in an organization, or I was working in a department where my manager chose to come to work when she wanted to come to work, and she was allowed to do so. There was no amount of accountability for her lack of presence and her continued absences. So I was already doing the manager's role in addition to my own supervisor role at the time. However, when she went on maternity leave, I had to assume I was the best fit for the job at the time, to assume the interim manager's position. And they came and asked me if I would do it. And really, all it was they needed someone to act as pharmacist in charge and attend, whatever meetings that she wasn't going to be able to attend, that she wasn't attending anyway. So I assumed that manager's position, and I think I got like an extra $300 in my paycheck, something, a nice little allowance, right? So I got that, and I took that role around about September of 2018 is when I took that position. So I was in that interim manager position from September of 2018 to January of 2019. And within that time period, there's a lot that happened. For me, I uncovered a lot of things that I am going to talk about in some later episodes. But just know at that time period, it was a very pivotal moment in my time in the department where I was able to figure out why I had been running into so many brick walls. And that's all I'm gonna really say about that right now. So I took on this interim position as I took on the interim manager role in addition to all the duties that I was already doing. So let me go ahead and list those things out for you so you can really have a mental picture of all of the roles, all of the things that I was already doing when I took on this interim role. I was leading a team of 63 direct reports across 3 shifts. And I was responsible for all matters of HR. So from recruitment, hiring, onboarding, the orientation and training process, the 90-day and annual evaluations. I precepted pharmacy students, precepted pharmacy technician students. I was responsible for reviewing all of the medication errors in a 900-bed facility. I attended several of the quality and safety meetings within the organization, presented at the Med Exec Committee meetings when asked to do so. Took on various other projects in response to any kind of medication related events. And I also, at that time, owned a goal in the strategic plan around team member engagement. So I was doing all of that work in addition to taking on the interim management position. Fortunately, during that time, we also hired a second supervisor. That second supervisor had not been trained in pharmacy leadership, did have a residency, but was really new and very green to the organization. And so during that time, we had a lot of issues with our IV room as well. So that supervisor really was inundated with a lot of the IV type of work. And then I had everything else. We did have a director. However, my director was off gallivanting and politicking his way up to the next corporate position. So he was never on site as well. So during that time, from September to January, I was pretty much inundated with all things in the department. It was pretty much me handling most everything. Okay. So I was handling all of those things, working in an interim role from September to January. In February, though, I was put on a performance development plan and told that maybe I wasn't a good fit for the department. See, the lesson here is sometimes people don't want you, they want your talent. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes people don't want you, they want your talent. See, they knew I could do the job. I was already doing the job. That was easy. but they didn't want me, because I was uncovering things that they didn't want uncovered. They didn't want people to know the truth. And I sat down and I told the truth of what was happening. I started working for the organization in 2016, and that was about a year after they had a very tough situation where they had to eliminate a lot of people in the department. Um, People called it VIA. That was like the term that you did not want to hear. No. While working in this interim role, I uncovered some information that had not been disseminated to my team. And see, from 2016 when I entered the organization up until this point, I've been there about 2 years now when I assumed this interim role. I kept beating my head against the wall over and over again. I'm trying new things, I'm trying different ways to engage with my team members. And I will go through some of the things that I did in terms of owning my portion of the strategic plan. But part of that ownership was unveiling some of the lack of communication issues. So I had this one particular pharmacist that undermined everything I did, like everything. Whatever I did, she found a way to undermine it. Okay. So I go into the pharmacy department one day, and y'all, I go hard for my technicians. I go hard for my technicians. All right. I used to be a technician myself, so I understand what it's like on a daily basis. Not only was I a pharmacy technician, I've worked as a clinical staff pharmacist. I've been a resident. I've been a student. I've been a technician. I've been a third shift night pharmacist that was the only pharmacy employee for a significant portion of the evening. And so I get what technicians have to go through. So that's why I go hard for my technicians. So this one particular day, while I was in my interim manager's position, I come in and one of my technicians is upset because she's got into an altercation on the unit with another nurse. And during this time, when I walked into the organization, I was told that the pharmacy department had full access to the Pyxis machines, what we call our automated dispensing devices. They were supposed to have full access to the Pyxis machines for 2 hours. From 8 to 10 is what I was told, that from 8 to 10, the pharmacy technicians were supposed to have complete access to Pyxis and nobody else was supposed to have access to it. That nurses could come in there, but it's really for pharmacy access. And it just didn't make sense to me. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. Like, nurses are supposed to be giving out medications. A lot of medications, most of the time, a lot of the daily meds in most organizations that I work for were at 9 o'clock. So nurses are going to be pulling medications between 7 and 10. A lot of times they can pull them 2 hours ahead and up to 1 hour after. Sometimes, every organization is different. They can put their own spin on things and their own policies and procedures. However, that is what I've always come to know. So the team told me that they were supposed to have complete sole access to this Pyxis machine, and it just didn't make sense to me. So I never actually said that in any type of nursing meeting. Whenever we had conversations to discuss, things that were going on operationally, any barriers that pharmacy and nursing were having, I would do my due diligence of explaining on both sides. I explained to the nurses what my technicians were doing, and then on the technician side, I would explain what nurses are doing. How do we build a bridge? How do we collaborate? Both of us need access in this Pyxis machine. Let's have a decent conversation. However, one day I walk in and one of my technicians is completely upset. She's been berated by one of the nurses on the unit around access to the Pyxis machine. Now, mind y'all, I don't walk around in my white coat. I would only have my white coat reserved for moments like this. I had my white coat, it would be on my door, hanging on a hook behind my door. And so whenever the white coat came out, that was, business. So I put my white coat on, went up to the Went up to the nursing unit, had a nice conversation with the nurse about how the situation was handled, how to talk to my technician, how not to speak to my technicians, and also what we could do moving forward. Also talked to the nurse manager about it. And when we got to a good place, a good understanding about what our roles are, so on and so forth. So when I come back down from talking to the nursing unit, I go back to talk to said technician, and I'm trying to understand, why is it that they keep saying that they have this access to the Pyxis machines? Because I haven't seen it in any policy. I'm like, where is the policy? I will do my due diligence of reading policies, but never saw that in a policy. And this one particular pharmacist who was like the pain in my existence, the one that always undermined anything that I said, told me that it is a policy and that they had, somewhere something on it. They had a sheet that said, and I was like, okay, please send it to me. Send it my way, please, because I need to read this. I've been here 2 years. I have not been able to see this. It doesn't make sense to me. In the meantime, I reached out to another colleague within the same system and asked them, where is this coming from? At that moment in time, she sends me all these emails and memos that had come out roundabout towards the end of 2015 after this disastrous layoff had happened. When she sends me this documentation, it states in there that this is not the case, that technicians in pharmacy do not have complete control of the Pyxis machines between the hours of 8 and 10. Like, in fact, it says the exact opposite. It says that the nursing team has complete access to the Pyxis machine between 7 and 10, and that pharmacy has no has no right of access. Completely opposite, completely different than what was supposed to be done. What do I do now, understanding that this is not the truth, that they have been spewing this lie that just isn't truthful? For 2 years, I've been hearing something that doesn't even make sense. It never made sense, and it's not policy. And then I have the documentation that shows that it's not policy. So what do, right? I owned it. I had to own it for the leaders that were no longer there, who did not communicate to the rest of the team. So owning it for me, what did that look like? It meant sitting down with each one of my team members and saying, hey, I'm sorry you didn't get this communication, but let me show you what the communication was that you should have received. The communication states that no, you don't have complete control and access of the Pyxis machine between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. You don't have that. In fact, it is the exact opposite. Now, the problem here was that the memo was written by the pharmacy director, the ex-pharmacy director that sat at that location, but never sent the communication out to the team. Sent it across the board to every other pharmacy department, every other system, but every other hospital received this communication except the flagship hospital that now I have to assume a leadership role in. See, when you take a leadership position, whether it's a manager position, supervisor position, whatever position you take, you have to assume the role of the person that was in the seat before you. You have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to own it. And owning it meant for me to give them the communication that they need. That when I discovered that this team had not received the communication that they should have received, I contacted the senior vice president. I talked to my then director. I talked to the manager who was on leave then to ask, had she received this information? Before I went on my mission to sit down and have conversations with the team members and give them the communication that they had not received, I talked to my director and I said, hey, I just want to show you that, some of the things that are happening within the team, some of the The culture of the environment has to do with a lack of communication. See, I found some communication that was sent by another leader that this team never received. I was just, I was dismissed. I was dismissed. I was told that, well, that happened so long ago. We don't really even need to talk about it. We've just moved on. Okay. December 18th of 2018, I reach out to the senior vice president and I say, listen, I discovered that our team didn't receive the communication that they should have received. And I had a conversation with my director about it, call me so we can talk whenever you get a chance. The message I received back, well, it seems like, you've talked to the right people. I look forward to hearing the results. Okay. So what do you do? What do you do in an instance where you have assumed a position, you've assumed a role, and now you're at a crossroads? What do you do? I owned it. I sat down with every member of my first, second, and third shift team that was there during the massive layoff, and I communicated to them what they should have received. I communicated to them the information that they should have received after the layoff. I owned it. One-on-one, I showed each one of them the memo that states that they don't have complete access to the Pixels machine from 8 to 10. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I had to give them the communication so that we could start moving on from a fairy tale notion and a lie that had been perpetuated throughout the entire team, something that was creating drama on the floors and creating barriers between pharmacy and nursing. They believed something that was not true. So let me caution you, when you take on an interim role, you have to understand that you are going to be inheriting problems that now you are going to have to own and you have to be accountable for. Your role does not start that day. Your role started 30, 90, maybe even a year before, because you have to deal with the fallout from what happened before you got into that seat. The other conundrum about taking on an interim role is that they may hire somebody else who has less experience than you. And if they're hiring someone that has less experience than you, then you might actually end up training your next supervisor. Now, for some people, that's okay, but I have talked to quite a few who don't really like that. They don't like the idea of having to train their new supervisor. So my suggestion would be, if you take on an interim role and it's really a role that you enjoy and you might like, apply for the position, but also use that opportunity to apply to some other positions outside of the organization, because you leverage the title while you have it. Leverage it while you have it. Go ahead and start applying for some other positions that are either lateral or maybe even above, because you're sitting in the interim role now. You might as well use it. Might as well use that title. All right, so that brings me to C, attending a meeting for your boss. Attending a meeting for your boss is indeed a form of teamwork. It's a form of flattery for your boss to even say, hey, can you attend this meeting for me? I find it's validating to know that, your voice is being heard and that you're valued. They wouldn't see you into a meeting if they didn't think you were ready. These are all the things that I think in my head. If my boss sends me to a meeting, then they value me. I also think that I have something to contribute. They know that I know how to conduct myself as a professional. Like all these different things, I think if my boss asked me to go to a meeting. So I had this similar experience. I think it may have been still towards the end of November, still during my interim manager situation, my interim manager role. And I was leaving the department. It's around about 3:30, I know, because I had a 4 o'clock hair appointment. And my then director says, "Hey, LaQuoia, could you present at the Med Exec Committee meeting for me? Because the VPMA has gifted me tickets to the Notre Dame basketball game." He asked me to present for him at the Med Exec meeting because the VPMA had given him Notre Dame basketball tickets. When I started coaching, I learned that no is a complete sentence. At that time, I didn't know that I could say no. I thought, hey, this is a great opportunity. I can't say no to this. And, you know, yeah, I have a hair appointment, but he has a basketball game. I thought he was more important to me. That was me. I assumed that I could not say no, and that him going to a basketball game was more important. Well, I ended up having to attend a Med Exec meeting with my hair. It wasn't even dry. It was wrapped around my head because it hadn't been dry. It was only halfway processed. It was a disaster, y'all. It was a disaster for me to, and I should have said no, but I didn't. I didn't say no because I didn't realize no was a complete sentence. Another time I attended a meeting for my boss. I was the only black woman in the room. They asked for something around, pharmacy related, and I said something and I was completely dismissed, and they were like, "Oh, well, we're just going to go back and ask so and so," right? So I have some situations where I've been a little jaded about attending meetings for my boss. Teamwork for me is collaborative, and if I'm going into a meeting where it's not going to be a collaborative discussion, don't send me. That's, yeah, it's a no for me. It's a no for me. So I do think that it is good teamwork to attend a meeting for your boss if it's something that you're interested in. If you're going to be valued, if you're going to represent the department well. But if it's going to be a negative experience for you or something that you really don't want to do, no is a complete sentence. I wish I had said no that day. I don't think I brought my best self to the Med Exec meeting that day when I show up with my hair wrapped around my head and like half dry or whatnot. Like, it wasn't good for me. But in the moment, I put my leader and my job ahead of myself. And many times I did that. So how does that where are we going with this? A, B, and C are all things that I did. There were times where I gave feedback, and there were times that I kept feedback to myself because I said, you know what, I don't need another target on my back. I worked in an interim role and uncovered things, and as I uncovered things, I owned it. As a leader, I owned it, and I communicated those things to my team. And I even attended meetings for my boss. But you know what happened at the end of that interim position? I was put on a performance development plan. February 21st, February 22nd of 2019, I was put on a performance development plan because I was told that my employee engagement scores were not going in the right direction. And not only was I put on a performance development plan, all the other black women pharmacy supervisors were all put on a performance development plan because our engagement scores weren't going in the right direction. And who, might I ask, were we supporting? but the pharmacy technicians. So, how does this tie back to episode number 1? This all ties back that I stated in the very beginning, hey, red flag, you don't have pharmacy technicians in your strategic plan. Stated that in 2017. At the end of 2018, I find out that they did not get the communication that they should have received, and that is why I'm frustrated. That is why I'm exhausted. That's why I keep hitting brick walls. And then in 2019, I'm put on a performance development plan for the exact same thing, for the exact same problem that I told you was a problem in the beginning. Even after giving feedback, even after working in an interim role, even after attending meetings for my boss, I was told that I was not a good fit for the organization or my department. That was a hard one. That was a hard one to take in after all of the time and the energy and the stress that I had gone through. It really was. But I want to leave you with the tip, though. I'm going to leave you with this tip, and what I will tell you is the best measure teamwork I have ever experienced. So I work in a different type of capacity now as a consultant pharmacist, ranging with a lot of different projects in a lot of different organizations. The organization that one of the organizations I work for is the state of North Carolina. I experienced something within my first month of working there, which was a PTO pass-off meeting. And I'm like, what's that? So my project lead put a meeting on all of our calendars for a PTO pass-off because he was going out of town or was going to be on leave for 2 weeks, and he wanted everybody to know what was going on, who was responsible for what, who was doing what. I was astounded. We got on a call. He went down the list of all the things that he was working on, what the status was, who was going to be taking over those things in his time of absence. And y'all, I was amazed. I was like, where they do this at? Because that never has happened to me in any other pharmacy department where people did a PTO pass off. So if you know you are leaving, the best thing you can do is set your team members up for success. We're all juggling so many balls. We all have a lot on our plates. Leaving a blanket auto response of, I'm going to be away, I'm out of the office, I will have, what is the blanket response most people use, which is I'm away from the office from this date to this date. Will have limited access to my emails. If you need immediate attention, please call here or please contact this person. Did you give that person a PTO pass off? Or how about all the other projects that person doesn't know that you're involved in that other people need to know about? A PTO pass off is the ultimate sign of teamwork and respect. You could go on leave and never come back for whatever reason. Who has to carry the ball for you? If you really want to be an active member of the team, if you really want to exhibit the core values of teamwork, leave a PTO pass off. That's my message. Leave a PTO pass off. It was amazing to sit in a meeting where someone actually had everything organized and you knew who was handling what. And he even put it in his auto response. This is who's handling each one of these tasks. So teamwork for me is collaboration. And part of that collaboration is when you're going to be out, setting people up for success so that no one has to pick up a ball. Nothing falls through the cracks. And you can do that by doing a PTO pass off. So that is my tip of the day from my Monday poll. Create a PTO pass off if you're going to be leaving. A lot of times in my role, My manager would just be gone, just gone. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what projects are being worked on. Things just falling through the cracks all the time. Never knew anything. But when I got on the other side and I got to see how things were really supposed to be, amazing. Amazing. Now, when I left my organization, I gave them a pass off on my way out the door. I ran down everything that I was working on, what the status was, and what my recommendations were. Because it's my goal to always leave a department better off than it was when I found it. That's my goal. That's my mission. Is to leave people better off than what they were when I found them. The last thing I want to do in this episode, because I think we want to begin with the end in mind, so to speak. That's one of my good philosophies, is show you what my hostile work environment grievance looked like. I revealed a couple things to you in this episode and the last episode. So, first episode, I revealed my resignation letter. But there were a lot of things that led up to this resignation. So I am going to reveal to you right now my hostile work environment grievance letter. So y'all, I know a lot of people have never seen a formal team member complaint form, so I wanted to, give people a little bit of an example of what this looks like. And I think it's important for you to know what it looks like, because you need to know what information you need to be collecting for you to actually go through the formal grievance process. So this is what my form looks like. There's generally information of the date, right? And I've got these things blocked out because you don't need to know all my information, right? But just know that, just some of the normal demographic stuff is going to be up there. What's your name, your employee ID, length of service, things of that nature, your department number, and who your leaders are. But I want to really focus on the information that it's going to be asking you for, because the way I look at a hostile work environment grievance or complaint form is you can't really fill it out until you've actually had a conversation with someone. It's kind of like harassment. It's not harassment if you haven't told somebody that it's a problem. You have to tell somebody, like, this is a problem before it becomes, a real complaint. Nobody wants a formal complaint if you haven't talked to your leader. So you're going to have to do your due diligence of talking to your leader. And then also, what do I tell you? Document. Documentation is everything. You have to document. So here are the questions that my formal complaint asked me. It says, please describe or explain your problem or situation. And I said, I'm being subjected to a hostile work environment and am suffering emotional distress as a result. My emotional distress was such that I was having headaches every day. And because of that, I was taking ibuprofen on a regular basis. I had been having mental distress as well, pretty much all of 2019 for some of the things that I was just sharing with you before. I think at the point when I turned in this hostile work environment grievance, my eye had been twitching for several days as well, because I was just so over the top, stressed out, and just done. Like, I was done, y'all. Like, when I tell you the things that I had to do, just to walk into that environment, it included things such as I listened to a sermon on the way to work. I would listen to hymnals at work. I had aromatherapy going. I have the Maxwell Leadership Bible I would read sometimes on a daily basis before I would really actually start doing any work. I went straight from coming from the outside into my office. I did not talk to anybody. I might say hey if I ran into somebody, but I just needed a moment to just gather myself, because the spirits that I was having to fight in that department was so high that I had to put on my full armor. My full armor. I mean, I'm talking about the breastplate of righteousness and the helmet of salvation, the sword of the spirit, to walk up into this environment on a regular basis. So when I say I was suffering emotional distress, that is, I can't even tell you how much distress I was in at the time of having to go into this place. So by the time I submitted this, was July of 2020, I said, I'm being subjected to a hostile work environment and am suffering emotional distress as a result. 2 says, have you discussed this problem or situation with those involved? Said, I have discussed a covert culture of racism and unfounded accusations of bullying, special treatment shown toward people of color, and being toxic to the department with my manager, director, and HR. So where this comes from is my then manager, whenever I would bring her a concern, would bring up something that some random team member told her, and it could be from 3 months ago or 6 months ago. It was always something like she'd reach way back here and bring something up that, like, well, I heard, or a team member said, completely off subject of what I'm trying to talk to her about. But she would bring something up, some point of criticism that somebody had said. Of course, most of the time it was absolutely unfounded. Sometimes I didn't even remember, like, well, when did I say that, or who said that? All of a sudden she would start backpedaling. But there was one particular instance, like my alarm bells always go off because I'm very adept to HR. I understand how HR works because I used to work in California before I moved into this role that I am talking about right now. I worked in California where I was managing in a hospital that had 2 separate unions. The pharmacists were part of one union and technicians were part of another union. So it trained me so well how to handle HR situations. And as a result, I handle every HR issue with an employee as if they have their union representative in the room. I'm very intentional about the words that I choose. Very intentional about how I interact with employees, just like it was somebody else in the room. They could record me. I don't care. I said what I said. Like, and what I say is going to follow policy and procedure. Myself and the other supervisor were addressing the fact that she hadn't been coming to work, and if she was going to work from home, what are some of the things, how she could support while she's working from home. And during the case of that, she had said that somebody had told her that I was toxic to the pharmacy department and that I was a bully. Well, those 2 words are very, those are trigger words for HR. Those are words that people can go and sue if they want to sue, if they think you're a bully, right? And so we need to handle that. We need to have a conversation. I need to talk to whoever thinks I'm a bully. We need to have a conversation about that. But she backpedaled. When I asked her, well, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's bring such and such, or whoever it is, let's bring them in here. Let's have a conversation. All of a sudden, she backpedaled and said, oh, well, it's not really that big of a deal. Most of the time, I don't tell you this stuff because most of the time it's just petty information. Well, if it's petty information, you're bringing it up now, though. I'm a bully and I'm toxic to the department. I think this is something we need to deal with. I think we need to get HR involved. Well, she didn't want to get HR involved. Every time she brought a situation to me, to my awareness, whenever I brought to her awareness something that needed to be handled, she never wanted to get HR involved. So I took it upon myself to get HR involved. So that little case number out there is the first time that I've really documented with HR the situation that I was under. So it goes on to 2B. When did you discuss the problem situation with those involved? So I discussed the culture of racism in 2018 with both the manager and director. In June of 2019, I presented to the pharmacy leadership team as a whole, and I made an HR report on March 15th of 2020. And I requested a formal investigation on allegations in March as well. Now, what's important to understand here is that, I did do this March 15th of 2020. It was like right at the shutdown. So I gave a little bit of grace because everything was mayhem at the time. Like things were just, out of control in so many areas. Like people just didn't know what to do, how to handle. So I gave a little bit of grace to the fact that that was happening. But somehow or another, my case just got closed. My HR case got closed. Nobody ever did anything with it. My then director said that he was going to have a conversation. Conversation never happened. So what was the outcome of the discussion? I was dismissed. I was dismissed in 2018. I was dismissed in 2019, and the case was closed in March of 2020 with no follow-up beyond my discussion with a team member who accused me of bullying. So I found out, I'm not even sure how I found out, but I found out who the individual was that accused me of bullying. And we had a nice conversation, actually. Had a pretty nice conversation about, what happened and why she felt the way she did. And she actually sent me a pretty nice text message shortly, a couple months after I left the department. She sent me a really nice text message with an apology. And actually dedicated some of my book to her. She said to me in the text message that she heard what I said. All the words that I was saying, they went to her head, but they never made it to her heart until I had left. And now they had made it to her heart. So that was addressed. But the culture of racism that I had already uncovered was never addressed. It was always swept under the rug. 4A says, we're here on 4A, has this problem occurred before? And I said, this has been a continual problem over the last 3 years, along with an unreasonable amount of direct reports, unreasonable expectations not achieved by any other leader in Novant Health, and a lack of support when requested. So we're going to break down each one of those points. But you'll see, what I really want you to see is how small those boxes are. So you're going to have to shrink down everything that has happened to you into a box that holds 2 sentences. Like these boxes are they're not any bigger. Like what you see is what you get. Like I could not write more than what was in this box. Okay, y'all. So you're going to have to be able to shrink all of that stuff down. 4B says, when did this problem or situation occur? Well, y'all, the lack of support for culture change began in January 2017. I already told y'all that. It started in 2017 and has continued throughout my length of employment. 5 says, if the problem situation has occurred before, who did you speak with to address the problem situation? I spoke to every member of the senior leadership team about my concerns and have voiced those concerns for the last 3 years. If the problem situation has occurred before, why do you believe it continues to occur? My manager is complicit in the behavior of the team as it relates to the culture of the environment. Number 7 says, what do you believe is the remedy or solution? I said the underlying culture needs to be addressed so other women of color in leadership positions are not forced to endure similar working conditions as I have been told by my manager and others that former black women in my position were subject to a similar experience and false accusations similar to what has been presented to me. So let me break that down for you. So at the time that my leader told me that I was toxic and I was a bully in the department to other people. Now, mind you, y'all, I will tell y'all, I told you before, I am very direct and I'm very truthful. And that doesn't go over well for some people. They, here in the South, people like you to sugarcoat things and say, they like for you to, be real nice about it. They're really focused on the delivery. How did you deliver something? And for the most part, I tried my best to be as professional and deliver things as nicely as possible, but I'm not going to sugarcoat things. Like, it is what it is. Like, I don't feel like it's necessary for me to overly sugarcoat something when it is what it is. And so I had been going around, like if If a team member asks me a question, they want to know why something isn't the case, I'm gonna tell you the truth. Like, you deserve the truth. You deserve transparency. You deserve the truth. And some people don't like it that way. They don't like it to be as direct. So when my manager told me that she thought I was toxic and that I was a bully to the department, I wanted to understand a little bit more, and I asked for HR to be involved. Again, as soon as I asked for HR to be involved, all of a sudden there was a whole lot of backpedaling going on, and she commenced to tell me that, well, it's really nothing. It's really just it's all petty stuff anyway. That's why she usually doesn't tell me about it. She doesn't really think I need to get HR involved. They said the same thing about two other women. I don't want to give their names out, but there were two other black women who had been supervisors in the department. And she goes on to say that, well, they said the same thing about them too. At that point, let's call it Keisha and Shaniqua. Okay. She goes, well, they said the same thing about Keisha and Shaniqua too. Now, that's not their names, but there were two other black women who had similar roles, and she said that the team members had said the same things about them. So we should just wash it under the bridge. We don't need to call HR about it. Really? No, I think we do. I think we do, because what you just told me is that this team has made the same complaints about two other black women in this position. You don't see a pattern here. So we just gonna assume that we're gonna allow this behavior. We're gonna allow them to keep making false accusations against black women in this position. That's what we're gonna do. So I call HR. I sure did. I put in an HR ticket. And that's how we got here. That is how we got to this grievance, because I put in an HR ticket. I was dismissed. And I said no more. But the thing about when I put this grievance document in, I was done. Like, I was at my breaking point. I was like, you know what? By the time we addressed this grievance letter, I was like, I have nothing left to give. Nothing. I don't have nothing left to give this department. I'm going to talk about how much I did give and you know, the ownership that I went through in terms of making sure that I did my due diligence to bring my 110% to this organization, to address the culture change. I have a lot of lessons that I can share with new leaders and leaders that are currently in their work environments, things that I tried, things that I was successful at, things that I could have been more successful at if I had the right amount of support. But I want you to understand, number one with this is that we didn't have to get here. We didn't have to get here because I used my voice. I gave feedback. I talked up and down the ladder about the experience and the support that we needed, and I was continually dismissed over and over and over again. So the reason this grievance exists is not because LaQuoia didn't say anything, not because I kept my feedback to myself, is because I kept being dismissed. Are your leaders prepared to respond when someone says there is a culture of racism in this department? Are you prepared to respond? Because I worked in an organization who is winning awards for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they were not prepared to respond. The leaders were not prepared to give me the support that I asked for. I wasn't even asking for much, but they weren't prepared to give me the support that I asked for. So that's what brings us here today. And it is my goal and my mission to ensure that you do better. You need to do better. And if you don't know how to do better, I want to help you do better. But this right here is an example of what happens when leaders are not prepared to respond, or they decide not to. All of my concerns just kept being swept under the rug. And I listed them here briefly, but I'm going to break them all down for you. I'm going to break them all down for you. You keep watching and I will keep breaking it down for you. But I wanted to show you where we're going. I think it's important to begin with the end in mind. How did it get so bad that I had to make a formal complaint and say, I'm done?